Welcome to the Flower Power Podcast. I think you're only the second person I've ever had on this show twice. So you know he's a good one with a lot of wisdom.
Thank you.
So here is my guest, Miguel Ordonnez, and he's going to talk to us all about compost, how to create your own compost, take care of your compost, everything compost. He even has a sample here he's going to show us. So welcome to the Flower Power Podcast again.
Good to be back again.
Can you tell us what big event is coming up that you're going to be talking about? Compost?
Yes.
There's the 24th.
From 7 to 9, that's right, next Thursday. There are going to be the Green Expo, which is going to have 50 or 60, I think, different contributors that will talk about different environmental projects and techniques that they use. So
great.
Me and a man who's on the Conservation Sustainability Commission from town of Vienna will be having the table.
Very cool. So that'll be a great place to get all kinds of information and green tips. I'm sure Mala from the Trace store, I think she went to it last year and did a presentation.
I'm not sure if she's doing it this year, but we have several people from CSC going to be doing it. Great. And I'll reference this podcast.
That's perfect.
You give me the
give me the code.
I can tell them where to go.
Perfect. So how long have you lived in the town of Vienna?
I moved here in 2010. I was overseas 2 years. My last overseas posting as a foreign service officer. So I've been firmly rooted here, have not left since 2014. Okay. So it's going on 11 years in one place, which for a person who's moved around his whole life, that's a lot. That's a lot of time.
A lot of time. It's like, thank goodness we have the seasons for some type of change here, right? I love being in a seasonal spot. So with compost, let's just start with somebody who's never tried it. Maybe first talk about placement, because I know when I talked to you last time, I was saying, oh, well, when I first started, I got one of those compost bins above ground, that you turn. Mm-hmm. And my problem was nothing ever broke down. Mm-hmm. I would put probably stuff way too big in there, like sticks and, all kinds of things. And it just never broke down. Paper bags, I'd put like my Trader Joe's bags in there, thinking it's all gonna just turn into perfectly beautiful compost, and it didn't. Yeah. So what would you say to someone like me who was doing that?
Well, first of all, in order to do what I do, you have to have some piece of land, either your own property. We have a quarter acre in Vienna, standard quarter acre. Some people have the lots like at Nottoway or some of the other places that rent for gardening, and you can do your own composting there. So if you had to do it in your house, you'd have to do it in a machine because you can't really do it. But I do it in the far corner of my lot, a little bit shady, because you don't want it to be too sunny, because it will dry out quicker, and it likes to be moist but not too moist. And as far as components, I pretty much stick with natural products. I stay away from man-made products, and I also stay away from branches and sticks and things like that. Not that they can't decompose, but they take a lot longer. I try to get everything done in the cycle, so that what I start from like my fall leaves in October, November, by the end of the summer, it's all ready to go.
And how many different piles do you have at one time?
Okay, that will depend. Each one, I call it a turning. Okay. I've got a long pile, which is only leaves, which I rake from my front and backyard. And if other neighbors want to give me their leaves, I'll gladly take donations. And then I start my kitchen waste piles, which is things from the kitchen, as well as things from the garden. Like she'll take down the old tomatoes, we'll throw it in there. Mm-hmm. And then after about a month or so, depending on how it looks, I'll turn it to help mix it, and then I'll start a new pile. So currently I have 3 piles. I call it my first, second, and third graders. Okay. And I also do a thing where sometimes I flunk them. As it gets to the third pile, if it still isn't broken down, I'll put it back to the second or first grade. Good. Because some things break down slower and some break down faster, and you want to get it so that you can utilize it as soon as possible.
So that was one question that I had, because the other day I just I'll throw in like a whole pepper that goes bad, or like a whole, I bought all these pumpkins. Mm-hmm. And I had one in my classroom, and I was like, I don't need this pumpkin in my classroom. It's way past the fall. So I threw it in my compost pile, but I didn't cut it. I didn't make it into smaller pieces at all. Is that okay? Or would it be
Everything is
smart to
okay. I
cut?
mean,
Okay.
nature is doing
Nature's
it.
gonna do it.
However, the more that you can make it smaller, the more interaction, the quicker it's going to break
Right,
down.
okay.
So everything works. It's just more slower or faster,
Got
depending on how much you break it down. I don't use any machines, but I do have a hoe, and I'll smash up
smart.
each time I turn it. I'll dig it up and I'll smash it
Smash down
down
anything,
and all
yes.
that kind of stuff. And as I pull out the old stuff that's not breaking down and throw it in the other pile. So that's how you do it. So it will get done, but it just takes longer. And like I said, I want to get it done before the season's over.
Okay, that's good advice to actually smash. I mean, that would be, seems like a fun thing for kids
And it's
to
also
do.
exercise.
And it's exercise. I mean, I was just thinking how much work that is,
Yes,
you know?
yes.
How is compost different from leaf mulch?
That's a great question. And in our case, the good old town of Vienna used to give us trucks and trucks, unlimited trucks. Sometimes we would get like 2.5 trucks, like 5 loads just for us in a year. So we would get lots of the leaf mulch. Now, I differentiate between leaf mulch and compost in that compost can have things besides leaf mulch. For example, like I said, we put all the dead plants from the garden as it recycles through the year. Also the kitchen waste, eggshells, the peels, the pumpkins, anything that goes in, put it in there. And so I differentiate. I consider compost, and here's a little example of my finished product from last year. That's finished compost. This wonderful friend of mine gave me these seeds. I'm going to plant them and make a beautiful garden. I'm really getting into flowers, thanks to your influence. Next time you'll see the house, we got like flowers going everywhere. But anyway, so the finished compost, this is ready to go. I'm going to plant these seeds in here when I go home today, and then start the little flowers there, and then transplant them. The leaf mulch is only partially digested. When you put it here, the nutrients are available to the plants to be taken up, whereas in the leaf mulch stage, you can still see leaves, sometimes full leaves, sometimes partial, and they're still breaking down. The cell walls are breaking down to release the nutrients. And so we've used the leaf mulch as more dressing. It eventually becomes compost, maybe another year or two. And so we put it on top for water management. We put it on top, so if it rains, it's like a sponge. It'll absorb the rainwater in and release it slowly, so it prevents erosion. And then 2, during the drought times when it doesn't rain for a week or so, it acts as a cover so that the evaporation is less. So we've used that. So they're both good. They're both different. And as I said, the leaf mulch that you put on top is dressing for water control and weed control, because you don't have to weed, because the weeds have to come up through 6 inches of mulch. So they're kind of very weak and they're very easy to pull up by hand instead of having to dig down through.
Right,
Then it will break down, and then usually as she will start the spring planting, anything left over, she'll just dig it into the deep earth. It becomes more composted.
Okay. So you'll just plant seeds directly into a container of compost.
That's right, and that's what she does. Yeah. I mean, if you remember from our first podcast, the Garden of Yin and Yang, I said I do brown, she does green. So she's got the green thumb. She'll take the seeds, although I'm getting into I do the flowers now. So I'll plant the seeds. She'll plant the seeds. They come up, and then she'll transplant them, and then they'll grow up, and then she'll collect the seeds for the next year, and then she'll take the plant up and throw it on the ground. That's my sign as a well-trained assistant to the master, to pick it up and throw it in the compost pile where the green turns brown, and then I do my thing, and then it gets finished, and then she takes it and starts a cycle. So it's a whole cycle. I think that one of the things you've asked in the other one, like, what do you learn from this? What do you gain from this? Besides the physical exercise of having to do all this, I think you learn the patience, because you can only move so fast, and nature has its own pace, which in our hectic world is very good for us to slow down. And 2, you see the process and how you can engage with the process to facilitate. The process is happening, but I think the biggest problem, if you have a pile, you'll find, especially if we have a place like in Virginia where the rain comes really heavily and then it won't rain, you'll notice that there's layers where it's too wet and too dry. And so that's part of the mixing process. It's kind of like baking a cake, except the cake bakes itself. You just have to take the dry and the wet ingredients and mix them up, because if it's too wet, it will not break down properly. It gets to be that stinky stuff like this in a sewage plant. That's called anaerobic, because it doesn't get air in. So it needs air, it needs the water, it needs the dry ingredients, and then it needs the time and the fire of the chemical reactions that are going on.
And I wanted to ask you, in terms of placement, what might happen if you put the compost pile next to a beautiful shady tree, because you heard Miguel say in the shade?
Right.
What could happen?
And so that's one thing I learned, is that I love to put my compost in certain places. And I just noticed that as I was churning and getting the final product to use, I noticed that there were like huge mats of very fine root hairs. I always believed or kind of knew that plants have some kind of sentience, but this was like pure exposition that here it was. I mean, they could sense all the nutrients of all this compost that I was making for my wife, and I have to choose between my wife and a tree. I'll take my wife any day. And so I would cut out the root hairs, and then I started moving it to a concrete slab that was at the property when we had it, and leave it there. And then I noticed that root hair started growing up there. So now we store it in old trash cans that are plastic impermeable, so that the roots can come around, but they're not going to get the finished compost.
So the finished compost you'd put into a big container.
Garbage cans. Yeah, we got 5 or 6 garbage cans in back there. Yeah, and that's what we use.
The plants will get it.
The plants will eat it. They're smart. I mean, that's Freddie the Freedlover.
Yeah.
They'll get it, because all the plants want it.
Right.
We want the plants that we want.
Right.
They have their instinct too. So
that's a really good tip, because
just watch out for that. And you might notice it. And as you're turning the pile, if you notice the root hairs coming in, just dig out that mat of root hairs, shake out the dirt, and then put it into the first grade pile and start it. Start as beet compost.
Okay. Sure. So everybody come out to the Town of Vienna Green Expo. Start your compost. It's never too late. You can do it. You can start it at any season of the year, right? You can start
That's
it
right.
anytime.
Of course, winter time, it's going to be very slow. I mean, I've done farming, gardening around the world. And so I've noticed each place has a different temperature cycle. For example, in Micronesia, where I was number 2 at the embassy there, part of our mission was to encourage sustainability, self-sufficiency. And so we actually had, just like in our backyard here in Vienna, we had a demonstration garden at the DCM residence that they gave for me. And I was able to make a compost pile from start to finish in 3 months. Okay. Micronesia never gets below 62, never gets above 86. And it's raining probably about 300 days a year. So it just rotted down really quickly. Whereas here, I put the leaves in, and they go through the entire winter, but they don't break down because it's so cold. And now I start mixing them up. I start turning them as the spring comes, and then they break down quicker.
Okay. All right. So now's a great time to start getting those leaves that you left on your garden, because that's what I did. I kind of left the leaves on the garden to keep the worms happy and also prevent weeds. So I'm finally starting to rake some of those last leaves up. There's no more leaf collection, so make your compost with it.
Yeah, one last thing, you brought it up. I think worms are very important, and that's one thing with the mechanical devices. I guess if you do have one and you can put worms inside, that will help the process. But the worms actually are what will get it to the final stage, because they're eating through it and then it's passing through their system. So that makes it very fine. So at the end process, you will see, like, you will dig in and there will be like tens and hundreds of worms in your pile. That's a good sign. And what I do is I will seed them into the earlier piles. In fact, we had a big rain about 3 days ago, and I noticed all these worms just kind of wiggling around the ground. So I went and collected them in this little bucket and then started seeding the
You poor will go piles. Here, you poor are going to work here, you're going to join this classroom.
That's right. And then they have babies and there's hundreds.
That's perfect. Yep. Smart. I never thought about, dividing the worms up and
Yes, you get one pile and you're turning it over and you notice them, throw them into the other one, and start seeding it.
And then in your huge plastic finished compost containers, do you add worms to those, or
Well, that's
it's already
pretty,
finished, so
pretty
you
much finished,
let
but
it.
sometimes there's still worms in there
Right.
that are finishing up because, as
Yeah.
I dig it in, they might be in, but that's the finished product because the stages go through no worms, some worms, lots of worms, and then they'll migrate out. And then if you turn it and store it, there might be a few worms in, but just keep on spreading them. But there's a lot of worms. I noticed that with the rain, just crawling through because they're drowning, I guess, underground, and they're just crawling out. And I said, okay, here's some compost piles where it's just like throwing them like for the trees. They love to eat it too.
Yeah. So one thing I recently saw on Instagram is this woman who thrifted a strainer with a lid. And she dug a hole right in her garden and put the strainer in there so that she could put her kitchen scraps in there. And the holes in the strainer, the worms can crawl in and out. It had a lid over it for the, to prevent pests. I don't know. Is that something you've ever thought to do? Put scraps directly in a garden bed, or?
I don't like it. I can't remember the exact thing I read, but I think that there's certain biological processes that go in, and during the process of decomposition in a compost pile, it's taking some part of the process in. So it's best to do when it's finished. And another point you brought up about critters, I do not put any sort of meat or bone scraps in because I don't want those kind of critters coming attracted to the backyard.
Okay. Well, lots of stuff to think about, and you're in the town of Vienna, so
they can always come. Yeah, I give tours all the time, and the mayor sometime this summer she'll have a walking tour, and we have a limited group of about 12 or 13, and my wife does this beautiful display of things that she makes and cooks, and then we give a tour, and that's what you'll see on the video. I forgot to bring the link. If you have the link for the video, maybe you could include it in this at the end so they can look at, because as I said, we're a team, we're yin and yang. I do the compost mainly. She does the gardening. And if you want to see what the whole garden looks, there's a 5-minute Town of Vienna video that shows the whole thing.
It's amazing. They collect rainwater.
Yep.
Very sustainable. Great spot to tour. And we're so thankful that you're on the town committee and for all your work you're doing there.
I think partly with your, your work and the work there that they invited me after that stuff. I started getting some publicity because I don't do any publicity. I just do my thing. And then people came to me, the town came to me, can we do this video? You came to me, can I do this podcast? I said, sure.
Well, I'm glad they found you first and I found you next. And there's going to be a lot more people that find you. Okay. And so yin and yang, we love them. And they're now going to be some of my flower suppliers. So I'm going to have lots of beautiful flowers this summer from the Yin and Yang Garden. I'll make sure to give you guys a shout out when those flowers are from there. All right. Thanks for watching. And thank you so much, Miguel.
Thank you.